Airline travel has seen a lot of turbulence over the past 40 years. From 1938 to 1978, air travel was a regulated industry with the Civil Aeronautics Board setting schedules, prices, and authorizing competition. Your parents or grandparents can tell you about a time when arranging air travel was a time-consuming and expensive process. In 1978, the government deregulated airline travel, creating competition and growth in air travel services. By 1994, the power of the internet was giving the airlines something to think about. The software for airline reservations was available from just a few suppliers. The oldest and most widely used system was Sabre, developed by American Airlines. As internet service became widely available, the question arose: if Sabre enabled travel agents to find the best route, price, and schedule, why couldn't this feature be available to consumers? Well, there was a problem. Sabre and other reservation systems were restricted to the airline agents and subscribing travel agents. Offering consumers online access to book flights was going to upset the primary sales partner, the travel agent network. In 1996, American Airlines' Sabre division did release the first open reservation system called Travelocity, but competing with the travel agent channel carried enormous risk. At that time, Sabre was running on over 130,000 travel agency terminals worldwide. So the question is, how intense was the battle against a wall of naysayers claiming you're going to destroy our business model? How does the management support a product that competes directly with a company's primary sales channel?
And internally, we had lots of battles because the rest of the company knew we were losing money building this online startup. So I had to do a whole bunch of things. I moved out of the building to create our own culture. I fought with HR to hire people from the outside. We shed various corporate departments. We didn't want to use their IT. We didn't want to use their purchasing. It was too slow.
My name is Jim Connor. Welcome to Game Changers Silicon Valley. My guest for this show is Terry Jones, who was given the job of determining how American Airlines' Sabre reservation system could be made available to consumers on the internet. Terry, welcome to the show. You led what is arguably the most dramatic transformation in the travel industry, and you did it from within a large corporate airline, American Airlines. Can you give us an overview of the innovations created and the resistance encountered in building the first open travel reservation system?
Well, it's great to be with you. It wasn't just a flash of insight, but what happened was I worked in the Sabre division of American Airlines, and the Sabre division automated travel agents. We had 40,000 automated travel agents as our distributors. And along the way, we invented a product called Easy Sabre that put Sabre on AOL and CompuServe and other networks. And you could make a reservation, but you couldn't get a ticket. To get a ticket, you had to ask the travel agent to issue the ticket. And that ran for almost 8 years. And one summer, the travel agents woke up as these online networks grew and said, you should turn that off. You're selling bullets to the enemy. And luckily, Bob Crandall, our chairman, said no. And he said, give it to Jones. He's over in IT. I was CIO. And he used to be a travel agent. So I went down and met these 12 people, and the first thing I asked was, why isn't it on the internet? It was 1996. The internet had just been deregulated. And we put it online, and it grew like a weed in the spring, extremely successful. And we had to decide at one point to become a travel agent ourselves. Our network of travel agents really wasn't issuing the tickets. They weren't accepting the messages that were coming in from Easy Sabre. They didn't quite understand it. So we made the decision to become a travel agent ourselves, to compete with our own distribution network. And that was the beginning of Travelocity.
You must have had some real pushback, I imagine, from various departments. I mean, first of all the customer service salespeople who worked with the travel agents must have gone bonkers, if I can use that word. How did you deal with that?
Well, Bob Crandall, our chairman, was a great guy. And he said, look, somebody's going to do this. It may as well be us. We have the right tools. We're Sabre. We should do this. And internally, we had lots of battles because the rest of the company knew we were losing money building this online startup. And of course, they could make profits right away, where ours was down the road. So I had to do a whole bunch of things. I moved out of the building to create our own culture. I fought with HR to hire people from the outside. We shed various corporate departments. You know, we didn't want to use their IT. We didn't want to use their purchasing. It was too slow. We liked their legal department. They kept us our competitors at bay. But we had to make a bunch of changes, which I discuss in my book on innovation, in order to be successful and to really fight off the corporate folks who weren't interested in our success.
How long did it take from the time, let's just say Bob Crandall said, I like this idea, let's pursue it, we should be doing it?
What happened is my boss, who was running the Sabre division at the time, decided that we should have a debate. And we actually had a formal kind of Harvard debate. I was not allowed to participate. It was all senior executives in the Sabre division. And it was, should we sell this thing or keep it? And we could have made $200 or $300 million bucks. And in the end, we decided to keep it. And that was a very smart idea because it got all the grievances out on the table. And after that, people were kind of behind us. Years later, I asked him what would he have done if they'd actually voted to sell it. And he said, well, I wouldn't have sold it, but I don't know how the heck I would have come through that. But he needed to get all the naysayers to stop saying no. By that time, Microsoft had announced Expedia. So we had another entrepreneurship company launching another travel company, and we had to battle them, which was a huge battle. So everybody decided, let's focus on the external enemy rather than the internal one, which is always a good way to get people's attention.
Yeah, so at the time then Expedia came on the scene, Travelocity was already an independent company out there as a travel agent selling tickets. I believe that's the right
Well,
time.
we weren't independent yet.
Oh.
No, but what happened was that they launched Expedia, and we were very worried that they were going to build travel into the browser. They were building other products into the browser at the time, and they had all the browser share, or most of it. Netscape had some. And so we said, we've got to get more customers. We did a big deal with Yahoo, a big deal with Netscape, and we wanted to do a deal to get the AOL traffic. And the only way we could do that was to go public. We actually bought the company, another travel agency that had the AOL traffic. They were a public company. So we became public through a reverse merger. We didn't need to raise money, but we needed to find a way to fight Expedia by getting more traffic from AOL.
American Airlines was the majority owner at that point then of the travel
That's
agency.
right.
And then later on it went as a public company on its own?
Well, no, we were a partial public company, and then Sabre spun out of American Airlines. The Sabre division spun out, became completely independent. We were still 70% owned by Sabre, but we're public. Eventually, after several years, Sabre said, we want this company back. We want Travelocity back because it's too important to our future to leave to the public markets. As CEO, of course, I had to run it for the public shareholders, not for Sabre. And I made some decisions that they didn't like so much. So one day I got a note under the door and it said, form a special committee, we're going to buy you back. And they took it private.
How did you or they determine the valuation of Travelocity at that point for the repurchase?
Well, it was public. So it was, it's fairly easy. They had to pay a premium over the public price. And we had a big debate. I didn't have a lot of ammo to get the price up. And in fact, they later were sued and had to raise the price a bit. Some of the shareholders sued. But you don't have much of a negotiating position with your 70% shareholder.
So then what happened to you? You had this experience where you, for whatever reason, saw this opportunity, said, why aren't we doing this early in the game, 1997, got out there, you're doing it. Did you stay with it, or what was your next step in your career?
No, I decided to leave. What happened was that we had a clause that we would get paid out when the company went private, and the only way my staff could do that was leave the company. And I said to the guys who acquired it, "You're crazy. You don't want all these people to leave." And they said, "Well, we don't want them to get paid out either." So they all quit and got money. And I just thought, I'm not going to run this thing without my team. And I thought Sabre was going to screw it up anyway, which they did. They paid $1.2 billion for the company and sold it later for $200 million. They ran it in the ground. So I left and became a speaker on innovation and change and disruption, and a consultant and an author. And later went to work for General Catalyst Partners in Boston. And I was advising them on travel assets. And we came up with this idea for vertical search for travel. Travel didn't have a vertical search component at the time. And General Catalyst decided to fund that idea. They found a great CEO and CTO. I became chairman of the board, and that became kayak.com. And I was chairman there for 8 years until we took it public and sold it eventually to Priceline for $1.8 billion. So that was a different experience and also a great ride.
That's kind of remarkable, because I remember Travelocity, I remember Expedia, I remember using both engines, and Kayak came along and I thought to myself, well, I've got these other two engines, why do I need Kayak? But you did a much broader search, is that correct?
Well, we did, and we weren't a travel agent. So what we looked at, and it was a dinner with the former head of former senior guy from Expedia, former senior guy of Orbitz, and myself, and a VC, and we said, look, these online sites like Travelocity are only converting 6-7% of visitors into sales. They're using us to find low price, and then they're going directly to the airlines or hotels to buy. Why don't we build a site where we search everything and you can buy direct? And that's what we did. We were a search engine, but we charged a click-through fee, not a commission. And when you clicked, not like Google, you didn't go to the first page. You actually went to the last page and just put in your details and you could buy a ticket. So extremely high conversion, a great user interface, super fast. And we garnered a lot of market share pretty quickly, particularly with our mobile app, which has something over 60 million downloads now.
So after Kayak, what was your next experience?
Well, I've been on now 19 corporate boards, 7 of them public. So I've done a lot of work with startups. I wrote a second book on disruption. It's called Disruption Off. It's about digital disruption. And then I got a call from Ginny Rometty's office at IBM, the chairman, and they said, can you come teach IBM Watson about travel? Which was attempting to use natural language search, image analysis, and text analysis to really change the travel UI. We did that as a B2B company. It turned out we were way too early in travel. Travel is still pretty far behind in deploying AI, but it needs to change because the user interface looks pretty much like it looked when we designed it in 1996. Where do you want to go? When do you want to go there?
My best read of your premise or your thesis is that, if I understand it, forget about disruption, engage innovation. Is that accurate?
Well, disruption and innovation are just two sides of the same coin. The only reason you call it a disruption is because you didn't do it. If you did it, it would be an innovation, right?
Yeah.
So, that's the antidote to disruption. You have to look. In my book, I talk about 10 new technologies, AI, cloud, 3D printing, robotics, lots of new tech. And I talk about how they're being deployed to change industries and new business models that are being deployed as well. And the first part of the book is sort of to scare the heck out of you. And the second part says, what do you do about it? And really, the second part is, in the large corporation sense, becoming more innovative and using these products to make sure you don't get disrupted. Now, you can also flip the handbook around and say it's a pretty good primer for startups to look at where to disrupt those who are already in power.
Well, you make a great point that if you're the incumbent or one of the incumbents, you've got the resources. You just have to now think about it a little bit more clearly of how to bring pieces together.
Think about it. You have everything a startup would kill for. You have capital, you have factories, you have supply chain, you have salespeople, you have brand. You just maybe don't have anything new. As the CEO of Panera Bread said, sometimes your delivery muscle gets much stronger than your discovery muscle. And I get it. I've been CEO and chairman of public companies. It's all about the quarter, right? And it's a lot easier to keep pumping things out and not take a risk on something new. But there is an end to that road. Eventually, you run out of runway.
So a lot of the companies, though, seem from an outsider perspective to be, too conservative about innovation. They, give it footnotes. We're going to innovate this year, but you don't really see them making a deep commitment. Are you involved in that transition?
Yeah, I do a lot of speaking to companies and consulting about that, and it's got to start at the top. It really is about the leader deciding that they're going to change the culture. And they have to accept failure. That's sort of the number one thing. In corporations, you never fail. Well, you have to fail because, as Jeff Bezos said, it isn't an experiment if you know the outcome. and 70% of startups fail. So you have to say, this is John's project. It was great. This is Bob's project. The project failed. We're giving Bob another chance. You have to kill projects, not people. At Intuit, they say we allow failure and harvest learning. There are other people who have the big failure award. They understand that, if you're doing research and you're going out to try something, it's the idea that failed. And that takes a big cultural shift. And, I've seen it in corporations who can't do that. And I've seen other ones who can, who say, look, we're trying stuff all the time. It doesn't always work. Look at the Fire phone from Amazon. That ended up with other technologies leading to Alexa.
Yeah.
So failure doesn't always close the door. My son did a startup with 4 guys. He's worked at EA and Sony and now works in Microsoft and gaming, but he did a game startup. The company didn't make it. They only sold a couple $100,000. But when he went for his interviews, they said, you shipped a game with 4 people? That's amazing.
Yeah.
So they didn't define it as a failure.
What are the conditions you find when you go to help as perhaps a consultant or a speaker at a company? Do you tell them, look, you guys aren't ready for it? Or do you say, these are the 5 things you have to do? Or how does that take place?
Yeah, it's really about senior management wanting to change, wanting innovation. So it has to come from the top down. The ideas come from the bottom up many times, the best ones. But the culture change has to come from the top down. And as we discussed a little bit in the last segment, it's about willingness to fail, accepting that some of these new ideas will fail and killing projects, not people. You have to put the right team in place, obviously, people who want change. And there are a lot of people in corporations who don't. They don't belong on an innovation team. You have to fund it appropriately and realize you're going to lose some money in bringing these things out. And sometimes they take a long time to come to fruition. So generally, I'm talking to CEOs and senior managers and trying to convince them that there really is a burning platform out there. The world really is changing, and they have to change with it. Once you get that culture change, then you'll find the ideas are there. I think it was General Dynamics who spent a bunch of money getting one of these online idea programs going. And over half the good ideas came from their own staff. They just weren't listening before. They didn't have a way to listen to those ideas. So you have to circulate ideas widely, get them around the naysayers, and then build a culture in which an idea and an experiment can exist and even fail.
I spent some time in the corporate world in the past, and there was a suggestion box, okay? And people were encouraged to put their suggestions into the suggestion box, and they were going to be taken up by management and considered. I never heard one suggestion get visibility. Is that just a failed
Go ahead. We had a program at American Airlines, I think it came out of GE initially, where we really worked on those kind of ideas. But it changed a little bit. Every new idea had to be approved by one person in the department where it was submitted and 2 managers from other departments. So, for example, we had a guy in the maintenance department who invented that little walk the plank thing that you see today that attaches a jet bridge to a regional jet, so you don't have to walk on the tarmac. That was rejected in the maintenance department. When this new program came along, it was accepted because marketing said, wow, people will like regional jets. And the finance guy said, yeah, they're cheaper to fly. Get this thing built. So sometimes it's about the ideas there. It's just not circulated widely enough that the head of the department, can't squash it. So you want to circulate those ideas widely.
I take it you deal with the CEO of these corporations when you're having these conversations. Is that correct?
Many times.
Do they express, hey, I've got a wall of resistance here. I want to do something, but I can't totally alienate my team. What do you suggest to them?
Well, sometimes that does happen. There's a great story from Netflix where eventually Reed Hastings had to separate the DVD people from the online people. And he just kind of put the DVD people over in the corner because they were the past, because they kept saying no. And that's kind of what happened with Travelocity. We were in a separate building with a separate team and a separate culture and a separate budget. And that allowed us to flourish without ever, being around all the naysayers all the time. So it is difficult to do that. And, you've got to run the marathon and the sprint. The marathon is making the quarterly earnings, right? And the sprint is all these little new things you're trying and these seeds you're planting to see if they grow. And then, then you can decide. It's like a greenhouse. You have to protect that idea in the spring. And then if it grows up, you can spin it out as they did with Travelocity. You can create a new department, or you can just say, hey, this is now part of our business. As happened with e-commerce and the internet in many companies. They started out with an e-commerce department, and now nobody really has that. It's just part of the business.
What's in your best, as a ballpark, what do you suggest as a starting point to the CEO who says, look, I know I got to do something. I've got lots of resistance. I've got a few bright, innovative people here and there sprinkled out. I need to bring them together, give them some protection, give them a budget. Do you say, give them 6 months? Do you say, give them a year? Do you say, give me a business plan?
Six months or a year, and give them some money.
Some money.
Some companies now have internal Kickstarters. I think Shell has an internal Kickstarter. If your idea gets turned down, you can go to the Shell Kickstarter and get funded.
Really?
That's a wonderful idea.
Yeah.
Others say, okay, we'll hand out a certain amount of money. We know most of it will be lost, but we're looking for this kind of odds, and we're willing to gamble on those things. And you see the kind of changes that are happening today where companies are making such bold decisions. GM announces the end of the internal combustion engine. Shell announces peak oil and is installing electric car chargers. Drone delivery gets approved by the FAA. I mean, during COVID, there were some pretty dramatic changes made.
Yeah, well, you take me right into the next topic, which is, has this innovation idea, this intrapreneurship concept suffered under COVID, or is it done just fine?
No, well, if you think about the biggest part of that today is, of course, digital transformation. It's the buzzword. Now even CFOs, it's one of their number one priorities. And when CFOs get around to it, then it's a trend. We've seen digital transformation accelerate greatly during COVID. Obviously driven partly by work from home and, buy online, pick up at the curb. But many other changes had to be made overnight. And there was one major chain, a retail chain, who had an 18-month plan to do curbside delivery. When COVID came along, they did it in 3 days. The boss won't forget that, right? and it's partly his fault, but everybody has to realize that you can do things a whole lot faster. So decision-making has been pushed down. People are moving to digital much more quickly. I think a lot of innovation has happened during COVID.
Good, very good. This bodes well for the U.S. economy, U.S. corporate growth, and so on, jobs, stability, what have you. Do you see any particular challenges coming down the road here that might be disrail the economy? Or are we moving, aside from COVID's displacement of jobs and so on, and when I said it, moving to the home and what have you, do you see any other major challenges on the horizon?
Well, I think clearly, industry is dying for more people to work in digital. I was on the board of an educational company. We were training engineers in one year online program, and it was post pay. So they didn't pay anything, but we took a percentage of their salary for the next 3 years if they earned over $60,000. We were placing 90% of them. Really? So I think educationally, we need to help people understand that you don't necessarily need a 4-year degree, and that it's not all happening in Silicon Valley. It's happening all over the country. And there are unbelievable jobs in data analytics and engineering. We need more engineers and data analysts, a lot of them. I think we're starved for them. Yeah,
there's I didn't touch on this, but a lot of companies have research budgets, but they just seem to be just based on pure research. Go invent something. The transition to get them into products is a whole nother scenario. I'm thinking out loud, this is what you're really evangelizing about. Take this research at the company, move it into a real product quickly.
Well, that's the definition of innovation. Creativity is thinking up new things. Innovation is doing them. It's putting that idea to work and getting revenue from it. And that's what's critical. Nothing wrong with pure research. I mean, unfortunately, we've lost many of those pure research labs, like Bell Labs and others. But it's putting it to work quickly. And what's amazing now, and this is what's so cool about startups today, is your IT is in the cloud. Your customers come from search. You can start the company on a credit card with a great idea and get funding. and build it with very few people. And there's no reason that corporations can't use those same tools to create new products more quickly with less people for less money, using the tools that entrepreneurs use today, so they can move more quickly, and the U.S. can, stay in the lead of innovation.
That's great. I had this insight as you were talking, so I want to just bring it up. But you're doing a lot of work with the corporations, but you are also a startup investor, angel investor.
Yeah.
In your work, how do these two worlds, one is as a speaker and consultant advisor, but
Yeah.
do you advise the startups to stay away from what the corporates are doing? Or do you, a lot of them they're not aware of what the corporates are doing. Or do you say, yeah, go for it?
Well, no, I think, look, it's fine to be aware of what corporations are doing, and usually they're trying to bring down Goliath anyway. Mm-hmm. So, I'm an advisor to many startups. I've served on all these startup boards. Being in a startup is very different than being in a big company, as we said. You don't have the assets, you don't have the supply chain, you don't have the brand, but you have a bunch of dedicated people and a great idea that can move forward quickly, and you can bring down giants. But sometimes, you can just find a seam in the marketplace or a small piece of the market. You don't have to change everything to do innovation. Travelocity was just do it yourself. Kayak was just comparison, right? Worth $1.8 billion. Yeah. Apple didn't invent the cell phone or the MP3 player. They just made them a whole lot better. So you don't have to boil the ocean and change the world to have very successful disruption. You just have to have faith in what you're doing and, get some people to invest in you, hire a great team, and move forward. And we talked in our pre-call about, all the reasons startups fail, and there are a lot of them. Yeah. But, with the right team and the right funding, you can do well. I've done 5 startups. One failed. I'm happy. I'm very happy with that record.
Well, that's pretty good. Only one failed out of 5, and the other 4 survived, right?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, very good. Well, Terry, you've been delightful, insightful, and I've thoroughly enjoyed the conversation with you. And I'd like to give you an opportunity to tell people in our audience how they can follow up with you if they'd like to, for any reason whatsoever, about entrepreneurship or innovation in general.
Great. Well, you can reach me at tbjones.com. I'm a public speaker virtually. I've got my own studio, and physically I'm traveling around giving talks. And my books are on innovation and disruption off. They're very quick reads that hopefully can help you in your innovation journey, and they're available on Amazon.
Excellent, Terry. Well, I want to wish you every success going forward. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. Great to be with you.
Thanks for joining us in this show. I want to take a moment to welcome the influx of new subscribers from the Cincinnati, Ohio area, influenced by our good friend Tony Shipley. We appreciate your support of the show, and we look forward to your comments. You can register for announcements about new shows as well as view past shows at our website, gamechangers.tv. If you listen to podcasts, you can find us under the title Game Changers Silicon Valley. We look forward to your continued engagement and participation in upcoming shows.